how this happened or why it happened?
Yes. Okay. Sorry, David. I hit the live button while you
That's
were in
okay.
mid.
Here we go.
So we are live. Sorry for being a few minutes late here, guys. I'm Kevin, here, CEO here at CoinMetro. I'm joined by David, CEO at EncrypGen, who has graciously arrived on time to present here so that we can talk a little bit about the DNA token and an update as to the current situation. So I'm going to let David introduce himself, and then I'm going to come back and give a quick kind of scenario, a quick breakdown of what happened, what the current situation is, and then we'll talk about the options that we're looking at over the next week or so to resolve that and get trading live on CoinMetro. So, David, without further ado, please, if you could give a quick intro to everyone watching.
Sure. Thanks, Kevin, and good morning. It's pretty early over here, but I'm up early anyway. So yeah, EncrypGen is the world's only functioning blockchain-mediated DNA data marketplace, and the currency for that marketplace is the DNA token. Now, people who've been with us for a long time know the DNA token runs on our platform as a multi-chain entity. But we created the ERC20 token back in 2017 to allow people to be able to cash in their earnings from the gene chain, and to be able to, and for users, researchers to be able to buy on the marketplace the currency so they can use it on the gene chain. But Kevin will tell you a little bit about, well, we're very excited to be listed on CoinMetro. We're anticipating the ability to be able to actually trade the coin, and Kevin will tell you why that is not currently the case, and then we'll talk a little bit about how it will become the case.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, David, for that. So yeah, let me give you a quick breakdown, everybody, of what happened. So essentially, we listed the DNA token, which is a standard ERC20 token, some time ago now. I think we're talking, what, 2.5 weeks, roughly.
About a week ago, yeah.
Yeah. And when the token was listed, we didn't go through a test round of deposits. The reason we didn't do that is because the contract itself was relatively standard. Now, I guess CoinMetro itself dropped the ball a bit there from not doing those tests. Normally, we do those tests regardless, but we wanted to get it listed. We had a time frame to get it listed, and we wanted to meet that time frame. We got it listed. What happened is that the way that the contract works, and the fact that we use contract addresses for receipt of incoming deposits, without going into all the technical issues, which we can, if somebody has a question, we can go a bit more technical. But essentially, the deposits that came in never reached the contract address. So they kind of got stuck in a void where we did not receive them, but they also weren't returned to the original address. So they're kind of just stuck in a gray area. When we noticed this, which was relatively quickly, but already a certain amount of deposits had rolled in, we shut down deposits and we started to investigate. When we found out what the issue was, we started to communicate with EncrypGen and their devs to understand what we could do to kind of remedy this issue. And I guess that's where we are now, and that's why we're having this talk, so that we can discuss the current options on the table. Those options include two main options, and those options are something that we recently did at CoinMetro, as well as Parsec did the same in October, if you guys are familiar with Parsec on the CoinMetro platform. But CoinMetro's own token did a token swap, and actually I think in the past the DNA token from a multi-chain to an ERC had done something similar. The idea here would be to essentially create a new DNA token, a new contract, new smart contract, distribute that automatically out to all addresses that hold the DNA token currently, and then basically distribute those that were deposited to CoinMetro's omnibus or centralized wallet, so we can credit internally the ledgers of all the deposits that came in, and then we can turn on trading. The second option is to have a more self-service, a self-standing widget, if you will, where either or both available on CoinMetro as well as DNA's own platform. So to EncrypGen's own website on their DNA marketplace, where holders can go, prove that they have the original token, and then swap it for the new token. The one hiccup, not a hiccup, but one speed bump in either of those plans are the Uniswap and SushiSwap and other decentralized exchange liquidity pools. And we want to make sure, both CoinMetro wants to make sure, and obviously EncrypGen does as well, make sure that anyone that has liquidity there has time to pull that liquidity before the new token is admitted, so that we don't run into this issue where people are buying old tokens without the understanding, because they may be new clients, of that there's a new token on the market. So we have the benefit of the fact that I think we have time to plan, and we have time to alert the community. And I think the majority of the community that's trading on Uniswap or SushiSwap already sits either in the CoinMetro community in Telegram or in our general community at large, or obviously the EncrypGen community. So those are the two, let's say, high-level options that we've been discussing. Both have pros, both have cons. At the end of the day, I think it's more pro than con on either side. There's things that can be added to, as we did on the CoinMetro token, we added in these governance options, which protect people in the future if they are phished, or if there's some hack, or if there's a hack at any exchange that may actually provide trading for this asset. There would be the ability to freeze and restore those tokens that may have been stolen in any type of theft, which I think is for a platform, especially whether it be an exchange like CoinMetro or whether it be a marketplace like EncrypGen. I think that's a great option, because obviously the utility for that token really lies on that platform. And so the ability for the platform to protect their users with this type of governance I don't think is a bad thing. So I think there are a lot of pros, but the purpose of today is to just chat with everybody, get everybody's some feedback, some opinions, ask questions if you don't really understand what we're talking about, to understand. The point is that if you have DNA token now, regardless of the options that are chosen, you will get the new token. You won't lose your tokens. If you made a deposit to CoinMetro and it hasn't yet been credited, it will be credited. You're not going to lose it. No one in any scenario will lose DNA tokens. You would simply be given, or you'd swap into the new token. The question is how we do it: manually via some type of self portal, or do we do it automatically? And there's a few technical questions there as well that we're still looking into, which essentially is how many DNA tokens might be held on other similar contract addresses that may not be compatible with the token swap, which means there would be some manual intervention required there regardless. And those things are still being looked into. I think David and I chatted about, after having this call, basically early next week, presenting then the plan, the timeline. And then this way, giving sometimes a minimum of 72 hours, more than likely up to 5 business days for those liquidity pools to move or to exit. Worst case scenario, or not worst case scenario, but if there was still liquidity in the pool come that day 3, that day 5, the plan would be for on EncrypGen side, or with the assistance of CoinMetro, to basically sell into the pool, remove the ether, and then give the ether back to its rightful owners once the new pool is established. I think that's in a nutshell, more or less, what we've been talking about. So, David, if you have any anything you want to say, go right ahead, and then we can start looking at some questions as they roll in.
That's very comprehensive. So
okay, so we have AZ saying he'd go with the first option, which I guess is the kind of blanket automatic solution. So appreciate your opinion on that. Also, somebody else saying that the first option sounds easier. I would say that for end users, yeah, there's nothing you need to do. The only thing you may need to do is if you're using certain types of wallet. Let's say you have your EncrypGen tokens in something like MyEtherWallet, for example. You would have to go and add in the new contract address and you know how many decimal places it is, et cetera, into your MyEtherWallet for MyEtherWallet to be able to show you the new token. But that would be the extent of the need for you to do something. And in fact, once we know, let's say there's a decision made to do that first option, potentially what could happen is we could reopen deposits on CoinMetro, even though they would end up in the void. We would know that you could start depositing, and then we would take one lump sum from that automatic distribution and allocate it all inside of CoinMetro. So that's also another option to make kind of the process easier for some. Wouldn't be obligatory by any stretch of the imagination, but it could make the whole process easier for those that may not want to go into their wallet system and have to add an additional token, or may not understand how to do so.
So, Kevin, for people who did deposit and the DNA went into the void, would we then send you the equivalent amount of DNA beforehand so you could get it to them, and then
Well,
it would
there's two.
automatically
So
go?
there's two options. I think there's two options. One, we can either tag those addresses where the DNA came from, and they will simply get new DNA tokens at the same value of the ones they attempted to deposit. And then they would just deposit again, essentially. Or we could kind of mark CoinMetro as the custodian of whatever assets were deposited, and we would get one lump sum into CoinMetro, and we would allocate inside of CoinMetro those amounts. So it could be done either way. I think it depends on if most users are kind of crypto savvy to a certain extent. Probably sending it direct to them would be the best option.
Right.
If those users are less crypto savvy and simply say, you know what, I already deposited, I just want them to show up in my account, then the second option. So that may be something that's still up for a bit of debate, I guess. But like I said, I think generally speaking, over this weekend and then into early next week, we should have enough time, I think, between the two companies and with feedback to be able to then present the plan, I think, to the public. And then I think we talked about, David, if I'm not mistaken, shooting for somewhere around February 8th to kind of finalize everything and thus get DNA tradable on CoinMetro. So, Mr. Maker asking, could we discuss the automatic distribution a bit deeper? Sure. Without a more specific question, and I'll scroll down, maybe you did ask a more specific question, but how it works is it's some people call this a fork, but I think that's inaccurate. But I've heard many people say it's a fork. It's not necessarily a fork because a fork has to happen from a mainnet protocol. So like Ether can fork, Bitcoin can fork. An Ether token doesn't actually fork because it doesn't have its own blockchain to fork. But some people do call it that. So if you read up on it online, you may see things about token forks. Generally, though, it's a swap. So what essentially happens is the owner of the token, which in this case is EncrypGen, creates a new contract. That new contract is pushed out onto the Ether mainnet, and that contract is created with a DNA token. With Ether tokens, you can actually use the same ticker multiple times, which is good and bad, because that means that a copycat can come and make a DNA token if they wanted to and throw it online. There's many copycats of XCM, for example, CoinMetro's own token, because you can make any ticker you want and you can use it multiple times. In this scenario, though, it's a good thing, because we basically EncrypGen creates a new DNA token. The old token is basically grayed out. So we proactively contact CoinMarketCap, CoinGecko, all the different places where the token may be priced or information on the token may be displayed publicly, and let them know that there's a new contract and this old contract is now null and void. And unfortunately, that can sometimes take more time than we may allocate for our roadmap. But when they do change it, basically what would happen is that old token would be grayed out. You would see the token maybe on CoinMarketCap still, but the image would no longer be the actual token image. It would be some grayed out image. So you can understand that token is no longer the valid token. So new contract is created, and what the contract does is automatically distribute tokens to every address that holds tokens, automatically. So if you have my Ether wallet or a Ledger wallet or wherever you may store your DNA tokens, if you have those on an address somewhere, automatically you would be redistributed the new token. Like I said, you may need to do something to see it in your wallet, but it's there. If you had 1,000 DNA tokens, you now have 1,000 new DNA tokens. Simple as that. The old tokens then basically become, valueless, but you still have them. You don't lose them. They're still there, but they are no longer accepted by the DNA marketplace. They're not tradable at CoinMetro. They may still be tradable on a DEX, because though decentralized exchanges are great in many ways, one thing that kind of they're limited is they are decentralized. There's no one you can go to and say, this token is no longer viable. It's up to the buyers and sellers on those systems for the most part to understand which token is viable. And that's why we give time in order to remove those liquidity pools, because what we don't want to happen is for an unsuspecting person to show up and buy old DNA from someone who's selling it to them knowingly. And then they end up with a token that holds no value. So that we don't want to happen. And that's why we give the time to do it. So from your side, from an investor side or from a DNA holder side, there's really nothing for you to do. You just sit back and the token shows up. when the contract is deployed to the main Ethereum mainnet. Simple as that. I don't know if that answered your high-level question, but we'll see if you have another one here, and we'll.
So Kevin, just to interject if I might, one of the concerns a lot of people come to us with is the proper CMC or CoinGecko listing. Both of those have given us some pushback in the past because we didn't have an API endpoint. We didn't build it that way. Will this new token allow us better to be able to satisfy those sites about the distributions of the coins so that they can list us properly?
So I've been down that road myself, the API endpoints. We had a pretty unique token distribution as well, because since we're an exchange and a centralized one, most tokens sit inside wallets owned by the exchange. And thus it took us a year and a half, actually. The good thing is that CoinMarketCap is not as bad as it used to be in many aspects, because they're not as swamped, I think. Plus now owned by Binance, which may be bad or good, but the good thing is they have more staff. Yeah. And so we had to go through a long process as well to make them understand how our API endpoints worked. So the contract itself is not going to give an API endpoint, but we could make an API endpoint, especially if CoinMetro is the place where Treasury sits. Mm-hmm. So if DNA Treasury, or if it sits on EncrypGen, and it shouldn't be too difficult for you guys to whip up an API endpoint that shows on an internal ledger what is what. And we could give some guidance on that for sure. But I mean, the contract itself isn't necessarily going to do that, but we can either use endpoints we've already created on CoinMetro, even temporarily, to be able to have endpoints for you. So you can say, this is Treasury, this is clients, this is client, this is circulating supply, this is reserve Treasury, not circulating supply, et cetera. So we can discuss that, actually. It's not something we discussed yet, but we can definitely open that discussion, and we can find a reasonable solution.
That's a recurring concern. So yeah, we're going to come up with a solution that solves that, so we can get the listing proper.
Okay, and either way, we'll help you push on CoinMarketCap and CoinGecko. We've had to do it now twice to assist with Parsec and now assist on our own token in the recent past. So hopefully we can kind of get them to move on it, even though maybe they may still require the API endpoint. Maybe we don't have it immediately upon listing, but I think we can get them to hopefully work with us relatively quickly. So, but we're definitely willing to work. So let's bring that up. We'll bring that up in our Slack channel and discuss it there. Yeah. What about the time frame for the first option, time frame for second? First option time frame, I think, as I already mentioned after you posted this question, the goal right now is to release a step plan, all right, a plan on how we're going to do this early next week, probably before the middle of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at the latest, and then give minimum of 72 up to 5. I said 5 business days. Maybe that's 5 days. It really depends. It can be flexible. I don't think we're under so much constraint, considering that there aren't any, some of the main issues that happen. For instance, we lived this through another token, Parsec, that I mentioned, and they had trading on another centralized exchange that didn't limit deposits. And essentially, deposits were coming in of old tokens, being credited to internal ledgers and traded against new tokens. And that caused a massive issue. Fortunately for DNA, that's not an issue. Because if DNA is listed anywhere else, it's not really monitored, followed, and no one really trades there. So CoinMetro obviously will limit deposits. We will manage it correctly so that there is no issue inside of the centralized exchange, and anybody who has a deposit automatically gets a new token, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we have enough time to be able to manage those decentralized exchanges as well, and help DNA manage those, help EncrypGen manage those. Thus, I think February 8th, February 8th, 9th, the first few days of not this coming week, but the next week is doable. But if we do run into an issue where maybe those liquidity pools don't get drained, perhaps some people are asking for more time, whatever the case may be, I think we can be flexible as well. So the goal here is to make sure no one gets harmed in the swap, meaning no one is buying old tokens, nobody's trying to take advantage of somebody else. And if it takes a bit more time to get that done, I think it's worth it. And I don't think there's any real constraints for us to wait a bit. But I would say not this week, but next week, sometime during next week, it should be all said and done. The second option would take probably slightly longer, though the EncrypGen had done something similar in the past. So they have a code base for creating this type of widget, this self-service swap widget, and it would probably need to be adjusted, but generally probably wouldn't need to be recreated. So that's, I guess maybe David could shed a bit more light on that, but I think it may take some amount of time more. The exact amount of time, hard for me to say, but maybe David has some insight on that.
Well, we would be able to adjust the period of time. So if we wanted to make a smaller or shorter window, we could, or if we wanted to create, a longer window for people to be able to, exchange their tokens, we could do that too. Our concern is to be able to make it available for everybody quickly and usefully. So there's a bit of integration too we'll need to do once we have the new smart contract for the new token. We're going to have to integrate it with our platform, the Gene Chain platform. It's not a big deal because the way that Notice built our engine, the Gene Chain engine, is basically so we can accept any asset. So it's not a huge deal. There are DNA tokens sitting on there that are multi-chain tokens, so we'll also have to be able to compensate one for one. So that's another issue. It's the question is really where we want to spend the time. Is it going to be in the upfront exchanging, or is it going to be with the integration? We're going to resolve that this week.
I think generally speaking, it's the first option is probably the cleanest, simply because we have kind of more control over when it gets executed. Mm-hmm. But I think it's important that, anyway, we'll see what the feedback is, obviously, as well, which I'm assuming will play a part. I know we've gotten some feedback in the Coin Metro group, not necessarily about this potential possible option of a token swap, but there definitely has been feedback. But I think the good thing is the community is pretty tight. It's pretty tight community, so I don't think we'll have too much of an issue either way. Most people seem to be pretty active. Those that were active in Uniswap seem to also be active in the community. So. That's hopefully that mitigates any extra delay. I hold quite a bit of DNA in a wallet. Will this be safe to deposit into Coin Metro? I won't lose. So right now we've restricted deposits, so you actually couldn't deposit it, and we did that simply because we immediately did that when we wanted to investigate why we weren't seeing deposits being credited. To answer your question in a different way, if you had deposited, you would be safe. You're not going to lose any DNA. Anybody who has deposited won't lose their DNA tokens. When a new token is emitted, you will get the new token. Simple as that. The old tokens, I guess you could say, are lost, but you're not going to lose the value. The actual value of that token will be transferred into the new token. So you may not have the old token, but the old token is pretty much valueless once the new token is emitted anyway. So no loss would occur, and you would end up in the same place that you were before you made the deposit, just with a nice shiny new token with maybe some really cool new governance features.
The new standard is superior. I wanted to mention that the gentleman who created our old token, he isn't with our company anymore. He was a fine developer, and he was using the state-of-the-art contracts at the time. And this has happened with other tokens that were created back in 2017, ERC20. Style token. So, we're grateful for all the work that he did creating that. It's things change over time. Code bases change and standards change, and we'll be getting a token that's going to be a lot more suitable for use in commerce and listing on exchanges, etc.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not trying to say that the old token was anyway somehow not up to par. I guess you could make an analogy that if you have a 1968 Mustang in perfect condition, great car, but probably doesn't have electric windows. That's kind of that's the comparison. So nothing wrong with it, to be fair, but there are some newfangled widgets and gadgets that have been created in the past few years that make tokens more efficient, I guess is the best way to put it. Right. So on behalf of the Coin Metro community, which I'm not representing at the least, okay, welcome to Coin Metro, but there are a few questions that will be asked inevitably. Okay, this wasn't even a question. This is a lead into a question. What's your plan for raising a decent sum in the current investment round? Okay, why is the offer only 7% and no perks for tiered clients? Why only U.S. investors? I can take the last piece. and then I'll let David, you can jump on the rest. Not necessarily what this Q&A was for, but questions here, so I guess we're gonna delve in. Why only U.S. investors? So it won't be limited to just U.S. It's limited to U.S. right now. Expectation is that early next week, if not over the weekend, we will open it up to non-U.S. The reason why it was just U.S. is that CoinMetro was actually tasked with helping EncrypGen create the terms required to have an EU presence. And those terms are actually finished last week, but we still needed to have them reviewed. And they have been reviewed. Actually, I was just talking internally about that before I got on this live stream. So it could actually happen today, may happen over the weekend, at latest early next week. It will be open to non-US. So the only reason it wasn't was essentially EncrypGen had done a fabulous job of getting the crowdfunding exemption in the US, which is much more difficult than getting your standard accredited investor exemption, which allows you to actually solicit funds from retail, regular people up to $5 million US. So fantastic. It's actually a pretty big feat. Not many have done it. So that's great. But they didn't yet have the terms in place to be able to offer to US. And there still is another filing, which I'll talk to David with probably after this show, which is Reg S, which is something that will need to be filed, Reg S exemption for non-US. But as far as I know, and we'll have to verify this as well just to double check, but as far as I know, that Reg S exemption can be filed after the fact.
Yeah, so it is. Yeah. I looked into that, Kevin, so.
Yeah.
So you can open that up. I'll get the filing in. The lawyers will take care of the paper.
Absolutely. So perfect. So there you go. So that's the last part of the question. If David wants to address the first parts, go right ahead, David.
Yeah. So I mean, in general, we have several plans of attack for getting us the amount of money we need to become profitable. One of them is through this STO. We're testing the waters in many respects. The STOs are a new sort of device. They're not familiar to U.S. residents. They're becoming more familiar, and Kevin is doing a great job along with their partner company, Ignium. They have a fantastic platform. What we need to do is we need to get crypto-savvy folks who want to be owners instead of just coin holders to leverage their interests in supporting businesses like ours into this sort of tokenized asset. And XCM did a great job. I mean, you guys really managed to meet your goal. We've got to because CoinMetro is an exchange and you were going after crypto folks, and that's not as hard to sell as going after crypto folks for something that's not in any way really a crypto product except for the coin. We have a blockchain, we have a coin, but it's a genomics project. We are a genomics project with our consumers are people who buy genomics tests and researchers who buy genomic data. So this is another audience, and while Kevin is doing what he can to help us reach crypto folks, which is essential, we're also reaching another market, and that is people who want to support our genomic product. So we're designing with BT Block, who is our partner as well. We're designing a campaign to be able to reach those folks, and it's a different target market. Also, they are people who haven't necessarily bought a tokenized security. So it's a learning curve, and we're going to do it. And we've got a lot of good people helping us, and quite confident we're going to ramp this up. As for the perks, now there are some perks in there, but
there are.
Genomic testing. Genomic testing is a perk that will appeal to people who want to support this sort of business. So that's a big deal, I think.
Yeah, and I think that may be almost a CoinMetro question as well. So obviously, CoinMetro has tiers for when you lock a certain amount of our own native utility token. And to be fair, those are, since they're so CoinMetro centric in nature, they weren't applied to the EncrypGen or they weren't applied either to the first fundraise that happened either for Tangible, which is a Japanese real estate project. That doesn't mean we may not look to do things like that in the future. But for now, we only applied those to CoinMetro's raise because it's a very CoinMetro linked product. And the goal here, obviously, is not just to get the same clients of CoinMetro to invest in these new exciting projects like EncrypGen. The goal for that platform is to bring in new people to invest in new projects and then get exposed to others in CoinMetro. So yeah, that doesn't mean, maybe in the future that happen, but there are perks. They're definitely listed on the page. And I think when we had the last question, there was about 7%. In the real world, outside of, crypto 10x world, 20x world, 100x world. Well, to be honest, outside of, even the real world now, I guess you can look at some of you look at the stories now about GameStop and AMC, et cetera. You might think that, making a 400% return in one day is, normal. But when it comes to debt products, 7% is pretty much right in the mean. 3 to 5% is kind of the low end of structured debt products. And then going up to like 8 to 12 is on the high end. And yes, you can go higher, but it also, anybody who's invested in any type of debt knows the higher the percentage, the higher the risk. That's why they're paying more percent. So I think 7% is a plus. Obviously, the growth of the business needs to support the interest payment, right? So there's always a calculation that's done. It's not just a willy-nilly, kind of you throw a dart at a dartboard. It says 16%. And you go, okay, that sounds good. That's not how it's done. At least when real businesses do it. That's not how it's done. What equity value are we looking at with the equity-like tokens? It's not clear from the offer.
Yeah, so that's also standard when you're doing a debt-based raise. You don't lock in a percentage of equity because the point of doing a debt-based raise at this point is so that we can continue to approach VCs for standard Series A round. And if we locked in equity, we would dilute their shares during the VC raise. So this is a standard operating procedure for this sort of crowdfunding. I'm not going to say it's going to be 1-to-1 shares or anything like that because we can't dilute it. It's debt-based, and we'll know better after the end of the raise where we are in terms of our other funding avenues.
One clear distinction as well, because I guess when you look at, let's say, CoinMetro's own debt raise, which was structured differently, but for many different reasons, because we are a crypto company, we have the ability to kind of be a bit more flexible, and we're not going after VC funds in the short term, again, which leaves the door open for us to be flexible. But David's 100% right. When it comes to your standard debt raise, you don't lock in any percentage. But keep in mind, there's one major difference, which is a big value that a standard debt raise has. If at the end of if at maturity you do not wish to convert into equity, you get your money back. You get your principal back. It is paid back to you in a standard debt raise.
Right.
Yeah. Where in yeah. Where in well if everything goes as planned, that's what happens. Right. Whereas in CoinMetro's debt raise, the redemption option is not back to cash. It's to XCM. It's to our utility token. So that is a major distinction, and definitely needs to be made of note, because that is how a standard debt raise generally functions. What was EncrypGen doing between 2018 and 2021? After the token dump, seems the token idea was least temporarily abandoned until this reboot.
Well, we've been building our business since then. We've been searching for people to be able to partner with in order to get data on the chain. The token idea was never abandoned. It's always been critical to the functioning of the platform. The DNA token has always been necessary in order to buy data on the gene chain. And there were DEXs that were dealing with it at the time, and we were burned by a couple of the large centralized exchanges in the past. Many of you will recall Cryptopia. Many of you will recall OKX and KuCoin, who treated us rather poorly. All of those, frankly, those last two were trying to shake us down for money, basically, and we didn't want to play that game. A lot of companies did. Other companies have done that, and it didn't help them in the long run. They still ended up getting burned. If you don't have a functioning business plan where you have actual business going on our gene chain, we can prop up the token as much as we want, but in the end, it's not going to work. So our focus for the last couple of years has been on building partnerships in order to get transactions on the gene chain of genomic data. This year, we have a number of exciting things I've talked about in other updates where we will be getting data from partners. So we're just signing a MOU today with a company called Indigenous AI. Some of you have read about it in our updates and heard about it in my updates and seen it on Twitter. They are partnered now with Afia Record, another company. Actually, I advise for them. They do medical records in Africa. Indigenous AI is going to be doing genomic testing in Africa with research partners that are commissioning those studies. So data is going to come in. They just have a PR out today at Indigenous about a study in Kenya. So we've been shoring up the actual business side, and now that we're looking at a year where there's going to be a lot more transactions on the gene chain itself, it's a perfect time to partner with CoinMetro. And unlike many of these other exchanges, CoinMetro is the real deal. It's a very transparent, upright company, and Kevin is one of the finest people I know in crypto. So I think the timing is right.
Appreciate that, Dave. Sentiment shared. Absolutely. But thank you for that. But I would say that, yeah, I think if you have a company that actually has a product, which obviously their product isn't necessarily, it's obviously not a crypto product. So they're building an ecosystem that sits on blockchain and uses crypto in order to facilitate services, but they're not a crypto company. If a company like that actually focuses more on the token than the development of their product, there's probably an issue. Whereas obviously in crypto, you have companies that kind of focus either on both, or they heavily focus on the token because the token brings them value, brings them money. It's a way of fundraising. When you see companies that put a lot of effort behind their token only, so they're trying to boost speculative buying of that token, they're doing that because obviously they have reserves, and that's how they fundraise themselves. So I think it's probably a good thing. I would say it's generally a good thing. Entirely a good thing, actually, that EncrypGen over the last 2 or 3 years wasn't worried about their token price. Because that's not their business. The token price could be $1 million or it could be a penny, and it doesn't change their business model in any way, shape, or form. And so that's a good thing. I think it would be much worse if that question was, why have you focused so much on your token price and not your platform? That would be bad news. I'm going to try to collect a few questions here because we're over time, but since there's questions left, I'm going to zoom in on questions that have to do with the token swap, because that's what we kind of came here for. The plan was to have a longer, an hour or more Q&A with David, and we were going to do this before, but then we had the token issue or the exchange issue or whoever, the issue, right, where trading didn't go live, and thus we postponed it. But sometime in the future, next week, week after, we will schedule a much longer session where we can go into depth on EncrypGen as a whole, the platform, what they do, and that'll be super interesting. So stay tuned to find out about that. But for the next 5-10 minutes that we have, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on token swap questions because that's why we're here. So this one, I think, this is to me. Why is this necessary, Kevin? Is it purely to accommodate CoinMetro? No, I think what we uncovered, I guess, without knowing it, is that contract addresses with the current existing token contracts from EncrypGen, from DNA, weren't compatible. And so while it is going to assist CoinMetro in getting the listing live and functioning and deposits back online, this issue more than likely would have come to light at some point in the future somewhere else, because many systems use contract addresses. Many exchanges, many wallet systems, et cetera, use contract addresses instead of just plain addresses, because well, there's pros and cons, but we're not going to go into those right now. But we use contract addresses, and we stumbled onto this issue. And like I said, at some point in the future, it would have been stumbled on anyway. So it's not being done, and David can comment on this as well, but it's not being done to benefit CoinMetro. It's being done because it's an issue that was spotted, and we could either be solved now, when it's relatively easy to solve because the user base hasn't exploded, because All this great news that Dave has been talking about hasn't been pushed out. You don't have so many more people interacting with the contract. So it makes it easier to do now, and it makes this listing possible in the short term. But David can definitely comment on as well on this question if he likes.
Yeah, no, I'm glad it's come to light. I wish we had addressed it earlier. We didn't have the information that we now have because of CoinMetro's attempt to accommodate the current token, but it is for the best. So in general, for the DNA ecosystem, we want to be able to use a better standard ERC20 token with other features, including the governance features that Kevin mentioned. So I think it's for the best in general.
Yeah, and I think we are going to be able to help in the future as well with EncrypGen for their treasury management, especially as those new clients come on board. Now, instead of EncrypGen having to have some mechanism to sell those tokens themselves, which leads to regulatory and other and payment gateways and all these things that are kind of hard and stupid to manage. We're kind of in talks doing similar services with other tokens that are in the space as well, and it essentially allows that business to focus on their business, and we can focus on everything else. So when a newbie comes in, doesn't understand crypto, they have some widget that they can use their credit card, use a bank transfer, however they want. They don't necessarily need to understand what's happening in the background. And I think that's a service I think a lot of companies are going to need, especially those that run platforms with utility tokens like EncrypGen. So we have a comment from the Parsec guys that they're ready, willing to help with the new contracts. So that's cool. Yeah, Daniel, I've been in discussions with Anatoly over the past few days and everything. So yeah, you guys have been great as always. So appreciate it. From a nice tip of the hat to Parsec. Great team, also a great product for crypto. Definitely a crypto-focused company, that's for sure, but doing great things in crypto. So we really do appreciate that. Anybody who needs help with similar situation, rewriting a contract, getting alerts, connecting outside information into contracts on Ethereum or any other blockchain, make sure you talk to Parsec. Great guys. And thanks, Daniel, for popping in. So there's a lot of comments here that are really great about both CoinMetro and EncrypGen, but we don't have time to post them all. But just to say that there's definitely fans out there, and people are behind the company. So that's great. I'll post this one because it's nice. Just before we go, so there you have there's definitely somebody in the EU that wants to invest in EncrypGen. So awesome. Thank you, AZ. Appreciate that. Okay, so AZ also, this is the last question. No, there are more questions. So my DNA will be sequenced as a perk. Well, if you look on the page, on the EncrypGen page, scroll down a bit, you'll see the perks mentioned. With a certain level of investment, then you have the option. One of the perks is, I believe, a full DNA. I don't know if it's sequencing, to be fair. David can answer that one, but there's definitely some.
So one of them is genotyping, and another, if you invest more, is a full sequencing. So we have both the genotyping partners and sequencing partners. And
imagining that, I remember the first DNA sequencing. I think it cost millions. The first one that was made to the, it was like Dolly the sheep when they went ahead and cloned a sheep. I remember that from 20 years ago.
I mean, it took billions to do.
Yeah, billions to get the research to get there. But I mean, that one thing, once they already knew what they were doing, it still cost millions to get it done. Yeah. And now you can get it as a perk for investing in a unique and cool company. Look at that, amazing. Okay, so scrolling through here just to see. Oh, no, let's get rid of that. I thought that was something. Is DNA token necessary, or whole model could be done with ETH payment for gene data?
Yeah, so we've often discussed this, and we've had this discussion for 4 years now since we began. Now, why do we use a DNA token? Well, one of the things that we decided early on was that it was a cool little idea to create a brand. I made these for our show in May of 2017 when I went to the Bio IT World Conference. We decided to embrace the idea of DNA as a currency. The actual data is a commodity, and the token is a currency, and we're creating an ecosystem. So yeah, I mean, we could do it with Stripe, or you could.
Yeah, you don't need. I think the high level kind of answer to this question as well is, to pay for anything, whatever it is. You don't need crypto.
Yeah.
Crypto as a payment option is not needed. People have cards, they have bank accounts, they have. I think the thing that escapes people is that in the future, I think tokenization will touch every enterprise. Amazon, Walmart, Tesla, every major company on the planet that touches retail in some way, shape, or form, or even those that do trade finance back and forth, will become digitalized. Not because they're crypto fans, but simply because it is a new database structure that saves time, saves money, and is more efficient. And on the back of that, if they have a token that they can either monetize pieces of their ecosystem they couldn't monetize before, create a brand, like David correctly said, which a lot of people never mention, but it's a very important point, because tokens become a brand. The name of the company isn't DNA for obvious reasons, right? But people know what DNA is. They see a DNA token. They might not know what the company does already, but they have an idea that it has to do with DNA. So it becomes a known commodity, and that can actually bring extensive amount of eyes to a business. On top of all the other benefits, where tokens obviously can be used to raise capital, they can be used to generate capital, they can be used to generate a monetization of pieces of platforms that you couldn't really monetize before. Think WhatsApp for Facebook. Digital money transfer, what they've already launched in Asia and things like that, are used. It's done based on tokenization. And so there's a million reasons to do it. This old idea in 2017 of you don't need a token, so it's not a viable idea. No one needs a token. Let's just throw that out there. No, there's no business in the world right now, crypto or otherwise, that absolutely 100% can't function without a token. They don't.
We think it's everybody's going to have a token. That's the exactly. Other thing. So now,
just like you could function as a business without accepting cash or fiat currency. You could, but why would you? I mean, why would you open a business and not accept money? I mean, you could accept sticks and rocks if you wanted to, but why would you do that? So no one needs it, but it has so many benefits in the long run that eventually everybody's going to have it, I think is the main kind of takeaway point. All right, we went a bit over. Let's say we might have one more question. Yeah, here we go, Mr. Maker. Short-term pain, long-term gain. I think that was actually a response, though, to something we said. And unfortunately, these don't come in for me real time, so I have no idea what he was responding to, but we appreciate your response, Maker, so I guess that's not a question. So if we can, I guess we'll leave it there. We went a bit over. If David, if you agree, in a week or two, we're going to have another one of these longer, and we'll focus more on the platform, what you guys do, and then we can take a lot more interesting questions. And to summarize, token swap, decision on how exactly it's going to happen, roadmap for how it's going to happen, and timeline released early to mid next week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is the target. Once that's released, there will be time given to follow the steps that are needed. For most people, it's going to mean do nothing. Sit back and wait, and don't worry about your DNA tokens. For some that are involved in Uniswap or SushiSwap or some decentralized pool, there may be some steps that need to be taken, but you should be well aware of what those steps are because, well, you're utilizing those platforms already. And there will be a date, not necessarily set in stone, but a date where we will look to have this entire process done. DNA goes live, tradable deposits are operational again on CoinMetro. And if you have deposited and don't see your DNA, you will see it once the process is completed, and nothing will be lost or in the void, as we say. So that's a summary. I think that sums it up pretty good. I appreciate you, David. Thank you for coming on. It was a great chat, great conversation. And stay tuned to both, I guess, the EncrypGen community, whether that's through email, whether that might be through Telegram, Twitter, wherever you get your EncrypGen DNA information, stay tuned there. If you're a CoinMetro client, stay tuned to CoinMetro. We'll let you guys know when the next chat is going to happen, when the next discussion, and we'll make sure that we cover all much more interesting questions about DNA, EncrypGen in general.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.